When I took the first vial of testosterone, quite quickly I was being read as male all the time. It's not about more male because more valid, it's just this is me.
He just said, I'm a boy and I want to be a boy, and I did think, oh my God, that means I won't have grandchildren from Freddie.
I've always wanted to have kids one day.
Not only women feel broody.
I'm going to have my own baby and I will be the dad.
I love being pregnant. Everyone should experience it, shouldn't they? Especially men.
Seriously awful. If men had to go through this all the time, you'd just never hear the end of it. This is a film about me having a baby, but what I feel like I'm going through isn't me having a baby or pregnancy. It's like total loss of myself.
Read them again.
Oh, it's so exciting.
As a trans man, to carry your own child is a scary, daunting prospect. You just worry for your child, that you want them to be happy.
Well, welcome to Queerguru, and congratulations on first being a parent, and secondly on your wonderful documentary Seahorse that told your journey to this part. For those who haven't seen it yet, can you tell us what Seahorse is about without giving it all away?
It's about my decision to try to start a family in my very specific and unusual circumstances, it's fair to say, being by myself. Ultimately, it's a fairly long and winding road. And I'm transgender, and so at the beginning of the film, you hear me sort of talk a little bit about my thought process that led me to wanting to decide to carry a baby myself, as opposed to going down maybe the other kind of routes that you're more used to hearing queer people talk about when they start their families. Yeah. And then, I was just lucky enough to find a director in Jeanie who I felt I could trust enough to bring with me very closely on this journey. So it's a really intimate experience.
How did you avoid anybody jumping in and sensationalizing it?
So I had two motivations for wanting to share my story. One of which was just to let other people like me know that they could do this, because we're still not told the truth by our doctors. And secondly, it was to show that you can tell a trans story in a way that is the opposite of sensational, and yet it doesn't mean that it will be a less compelling and worthwhile story to tell. So I guess it just couldn't have been sensational, because I set out for it very much not to be, and every step made sure that people who I found to collaborate with, who I then sort of handed over control to at a certain point with Jeanie, I wanted her to be the storyteller, because I felt like I was too close to it, and that's not my expertise. I just knew that that we were on the same page, and she wanted to tell a small story.
People are watching this, that you are a journalist by trade.
Yes, absolutely. So I felt I'm in a privileged position to be able to see if I can prove my own theory, which is that you don't have to tell a sensational story. Yeah.
Freddie, I don't want to give them away, but there are times in your journey which were very tough. Was there any times when you said, okay, stop filming, stop this?
There were times when I found it really hard, but I'm not a very confrontational person. So I would say that I had more of those feelings and thoughts and moments of self-doubt when I wasn't with Jeanie.
Yeah.
And as a journalist as well, I know how valuable the time is that you have to spend together and film together. And so I was conscious of, it's my experience, but I also had my kind of professional hat on when we were doing that. So I wanted the film to be as good as it could be. Yeah. And I knew that meant giving up a certain amount of control and just making myself more vulnerable than I was used to. But I had moments when I was sort of in bed at night thinking, God, is this really the right thing to do? And I always just went back to check that I still had that fundamental sense of like, why am I doing this? Is that motivation still there? And even in the really wobbly moments, it was still there. So I just knew that I had to carry on.
I think the thing that grabbed me most of all, and the toughest part watching you, was when you had realised you had to give up your testosterone, and that sort of started losing your masculinity, but you worked so hard about. Was that the toughest part for you?
Simplest way to put it is that the hardest thing for me, was my internal experience as opposed to my moving through the world. I certainly felt massive changes emotionally and physically, but I wouldn't say that they were obvious to anyone else, which in its own way was a weird struggle because I just couldn't explain why I was finding it so hard. So yeah, like I always, no one ever read me as a pregnant man, but yes, I felt very, dysphoric, I suppose is the word.
I think if anybody had doubts about what you did, you lose it in a moment that we first see Jack. I mean, we lose any doubt there, and it's quite amazing part. How would you advise other trans men now, after you've been through it, who are thinking about having a child?
I should clarify actually that Jack is actually a pseudonym that was used for the Guardian interview that we did. But yeah, it's helpful to have a name. But I've sort of deliberately, I've wanted to shield his identity because that's for him to decide whether to share, in his own future. Well, this is probably going to sound really odd, but I would first thing I would say is that, becoming a dad, becoming a parent has taught me that if you feel like you don't want to become a parent, then don't, because it's really hard. And it's one of those things that, I think there's still too much stigma attached to the idea of not wanting kids, no matter who you are, man or woman, non-binary, whatever. So yeah, if you feel pretty sure about that, then trust your gut. But if you are a trans man or a trans masculine person, non-binary, who feels like you do want to start your family or you do want to have kids, then if pregnancy feels like an option for you, then you should consider it, and it doesn't make you any less of who you are. And that's true even if, unlike me, for me it was like a pragmatic decision. It just felt simple, and I felt like I could maintain control, more control than if I sort of subjected myself to the government agencies that would come along with adoption or fostering, and surrogacy just felt like too complicated. And I felt like I could handle pregnancy because I have close family support. But I also have trans friends who desperately wanted to be pregnant, who felt like that experience was for them in a very much more fundamental way that we would traditionally associate with sort of this idea that pregnancy is the kind of core feminine experience. I think it can also be just a core personal experience, no matter who you are. And I think that's an incredible thing to own and reclaim for trans men. So, if you have weird feelings about, if you feel conflicted, however you feel is valid and fine and understandable. And there'll be people out there who feel the same way as you, and you can find us on Facebook. If you look in groups, you're not alone. Far from it.
Freddie, the movie's about to come out now in the US. That's why we're talking to you. What do you want people to take away from seeing this film?
I think Jeannie's ultimate achievement with the film is that it's quite a small story. It's quite universal. And I think people will probably come to it not expecting that. And so I hope that's what they realize, I suppose, that it's not going to blow your mind, and it's going to do something much more powerful and important, which is hopefully feel a little bit like you might have spent an hour and a half in the company of a trans person. If you've never met a trans person before, if you don't have any in your lives. And obviously I'm talking to this is audiences who aren't trans or who aren't queer.
And we hope this movie is going to get to them as well.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I always set out, obviously it's important for us to have films and TV shows and books and stuff for ourselves.
Absolutely.
But maybe again, as a journalist, I've always felt it was, I wanted to try and sort of do both, I suppose, which was make a film that I could be proud of and that we could have as a community, but also that anyone else could watch. And I hope it makes them cry, I guess.
It does. Take it from us. So, a couple of other questions before we go.
Sure.
Will Jack be having a sibling? Is there a sequel to this movie?
The dreaded question. I would say that I haven't. Yeah, I don't know.
I can see you
Haven't
having more
ruled it
children.
out.
I can. It's obvious who you are. But let's go back to one sad moment. You are fighting with the British and UK authorities about being recognised as a father on Jack's birth certificate, and you've just lost the last round. What's next for you?
So we're currently waiting to hear whether we will have permission to take it to the Supreme Court, which is, the third and final, I suppose, round of courts in the UK. And then the option would probably be to take it to the European courts, because that's not affected by Brexit for boring and complicated reasons.
Point this out to us. We have gender recognition in the UK. This is about you being the father, correct?
Well, almost.
Okay.
So what we are arguing for is for my gender recognition certificate, which is what I have, which is the sort of system we have here in the UK, to be honoured, I suppose, in the way that we interpret it, that it should be, which is including as in my role as a parent. Now, I'm not. We're actually saying that a good outcome would be either father or parent. I maybe at some point in the future it would be better to have gender neutral options, parent one, parent two. There are lots of countries that do it that way, because not only because of trans parents, of which there are many, but because of all the different ways in which we can create family nowadays, and all the different ways in which one can be a father or a mother. What I found really troubling about the judgments that didn't go our way were the way that they treat the word mother, which I think should sit uncomfortably with all of us, not just me having to be called a mother, but the idea that the definition of a mother is a person that gives birth. Like, I think that doesn't really make sense much anymore in this day and age. Maybe it did in the 50s, but there are lots of women out there who I think would take issue with that definition if they understood and knew really the realities of the legislation as it currently stands. So yes, and it also affects all trans parents, because actually, whether or not I gave birth as a trans man, even if my partner was a cis woman and she gave birth, I still wouldn't be able to register as the father because I'm trans. So actually, and I didn't realise that. I don't think anyone knew that before the government was forced to clarify its position in our court hearing. So when we realised that was the case, then I realised actually this is much bigger than just my family and my situation. So we need to see it through. So I feel...
Well, good luck with you, because it's a very public fight, and you're a very private person, we know that. Just tell us one last thing, which I should have asked you at the beginning. Why was it called Seahorse?
Seahorses, the male seahorses are fertilised and gestate their babies and give birth. And often it's talked about as though... often it's talked about as though the male seahorses have a pouch that they kind of carry the babies in, but actually that's not really true. They actually fertilise and gestate the babies in the way that we would imagine, other pregnancies happening. So often we call ourselves seahorse dads in our little community.
That's a nice explanation. Thank you so much. Thank you for sharing the story. It took a lot of courage, and we're envious of Jack of having you as a father, because you couldn't have been a better parent. Thanks for talking to us.
Thank you so much.
I just want to close my eyes and be on the other side of this.
Well done, Freddie. Well done.
Oh, God.